There is a moment every powerful person faces: a rupture, a breaking point. It's not glamorous, not cinematic. It's a private implosion where the illusion of control dissolves and everything you thought you were stands exposed. You may have been betrayed, humiliated, mocked, or crushed under the weight of failure. This is not where your story ends. This is where it begins. Because real strategy does not start in comfort. It begins when you're in the dirt, stripped bare of everything that made you feel safe. Only when you are cracked open does the truth become visible. Power is not born in victory. Power is born in collapse. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology gave it language. He wrote, "Not for kings sitting securely on their thrones, but for rulers in crisis, for leaders exiled, for men about to lose their crowns." His message was as unsentimental as it was liberating. If you are weak, you are prey. If you are emotional, you are bait. If you cling to your old self out of nostalgia, you will rebuild, not your freedom, but your prison. The fall is not the tragedy. The tragedy is failing to use it. How does a ruthless strategist rebuild from ashes? They begin by discarding the identity that failed. Like a snake shedding skin, they leave behind the person who was betrayed, overlooked, or dismissed. That version of you was not built to win in the world as an island. It was built to be liked, to be accepted, to be manageable. That self cannot take you where you must go. This is not about shame. This is about design. Machiavelli would warn, the moment you start clinging to the image of who you were is the moment your enemies win. A strategist accepts, with clinical clarity, that their old self must die, not with self-pity, not with tears, with intent. You are not recovering, you are reconstructing. And this reconstruction begins with the first violent step, cold detachment. Neuroscience calls this cognitive diffusion, the deliberate distancing from your own thoughts and emotions. You cut the noise, you silence opinions, you retreat not to escape but to observe. This is not healing, this is war planning. In behavioral psychology, this is the pivot point where victimhood dissolves and agency reemerges. You do not journal your feelings for comfort. You write intelligence reports. What weakness was exploited? What signals did you send that invited disrespect? Where did you tolerate too much? The brain, under stress, craves narrative, but here, you deny narrative and seek data. This is a cold audit of your vulnerabilities, because rebuilding, without knowing where the cracks were, is just painting over rot. Once detachment is secured, the strategist moves to mapping power zones. This is where social psychology becomes your ally. Most people define power in terms of approval. They ask, do people like me? But a strategist defines power in terms of control. What can I say no to? Who do I no longer need? What can I walk away from that others can't? Those are your leverage points. They are not always obvious. Sometimes they're skills, sometimes they're networks, sometimes they're simple habits that give you more time than anyone else. Whatever they are, you do not build your life away from them. You build your life around them. If you are persuasive, stop chasing likability. If you are analytical, stop chasing charisma. Power is not about becoming well-rounded. That is a myth propagated by systems that need you compliant. Power is about becoming a weapon, narrow, precise, and unavoidable. Then comes resource alignment. The ruthless do not let energy leak. They know exactly what drains them and cut it off. Not later, not softly, immediately. This includes people, habits, addictions, even ideas. In neuroscience, this is synaptic pruning, the brain's own ruthless deletion of connections that no longer serve growth. You become your own pruning mechanism. Anything that makes you weaker, even if it feels good, must go. The strategist treats their energy like a sovereign kingdom. No leaks, no freeloaders, no confusion. This is where most people fail. They want to rebuild, but keep the poison nearby, like a souvenir from the old self. The ruthless don't. And when the ruthless return, they do not return as they left. They do not step back into the room with explanations. They return with silence, sharpness, and stillness. They build a new image deliberately, not to impress, to intimidate, not with volume, with mystery. Social psychology calls this the scarcity principle. What is hidden becomes more valuable. What is quiet becomes more feared. Machiavelli wrote that rulers must appear virtuous, but only when it suits them. Your new image is not decoration. It is a weapon designed to make people think twice before testing you again. Information becomes your next field of battle. Oversharing is the death of leverage. The weak broadcast every step, seeking reassurance. The strategist knows ambiguity is power. They move quietly. They let others guess. They do not explain their plans until the results are already undeniable. This is not isolation. This is selective disclosure. Show just enough to confuse. Appear harmless until it's too late. This is not paranoia, it's strategy. While rebuilding, you also create what I call a psychological firewall. You no longer entertain those who drain, delay, or distract. You don't fight them, you delete them gently. You become unreactive to bait. You stop defending yourself. You let people talk, because every second spent explaining is a second stolen from execution. This is cold math. The strategist always does the math. Finally, the ruthless builder chooses one weapon and sharpens it until it's lethal. Influence, precision, charisma, logic. Every powerful figure in history is remembered for one thing, done relentlessly well. You don't need to master everything. You need to become unforgettable for something. This is how you stop healing like a victim and start moving like a ruler in exile. This is how you rebuild, not to survive, but to never be broken the same way again. Because here's the divide most miss. Ordinary transformation is about feeling better. Machiavellian reconstruction is about winning. Authenticity, in this frame, is not a virtue. It's a tactic. If a mask gets you further than a face, you wear the mask. If silence gives you more control than speech, you go silent. If walking alone is more strategic than being surrounded, you disappear. Real power is rarely recognized by the majority. It is feared in silence and respected in shadows. And once you've stripped your weaknesses and rejected approval, you move to the second phase. Positional reconstruction, not becoming stronger, but becoming unmovable. Once the teardown is complete, once the weak scaffolding of the old self is burned away, you enter the second phase, positional reconstruction. This is no longer about removing cracks. This is about building foundations so deep they cannot be dislodged. Because strength alone is not enough. History is littered with strong men, broken by those who understood positioning better. What matters is not just that you rise again, but that when you do, no one can move you. This begins with mastering your value vector, your sharpest, most undeniable utility. Every person has one, though most never refine it. It's the skill, trait, or presence that makes you unavoidable in any environment. For some, it's insight, so piercing, it feels prophetic. For others, it's precision, the ability to execute flawlessly under pressure. For a rare few, it's sheer presence, the way a room bends when they walk in. The point is not what it island. The point is that it must be something the world needs, not merely something it likes. Machiavelli warned, a prince must learn how not to be good, and to wield that knowledge as necessity dictates. Applied here, you must learn to bend your morality, not abandon it, but adapt it, especially when survival is at stake. Most people, when rebuilding, obsess over fairness. They want to be seen as good. The strategist obsesses over being immovable. Morality for them is not static. It is situational, and survival is always the higher law. The next principle is non-negotiable. Build leverage before loyalty. This cuts directly against the narratives most of us are raised with. We are told loyalty is sacred, that relationships are the bedrock of power, and they can be but only if leverage comes first. Loyalty without leverage is dependency. Dependency is vulnerability, and vulnerability invites betrayal. A strategist constructs assets that command respect. They become the keeper of knowledge others can't find, the architect of systems others can't replicate. the owner of something others need access to. Loyalty is unstable. It bends with time, emotion, opportunity. But leverage forces even the disloyal to comply. And once leverage is in place, another dangerous shift occurs: information filtration. Most people consume blindly. They scroll endlessly, read for comfort, listen to anyone with a confident tone. The strategist does not. Every input passes a filter. Will this sharpen my aim or increase my leverage? If not, it dies at the gate. The mind becomes sovereign territory. Entry is denied unless it serves the kingdom. This is brutal discipline, but it transforms you. Because while the average person drowns in noise, the strategist extracts only signal. Controlled coldness emerges next. This is not cruelty. This is distance by design, polite on the surface, unreadable beneath it. Social psychology teaches us that uncertainty triggers unease. When people cannot predict you, they respect you. They may even fear you. During reconstruction, scavengers will come, people who sense vulnerability, who offer comfort only to keep you soft. The strategist thanks them, then walks away. Because not all kindness is benevolence. Some kindness is a leash. Some comfort is corrosion. How do you train this new mental muscle? Through rehearsed resilience. You simulate betrayals before they happen. You ask, what will I do if I fail publicly again? How will I respond if I'm mocked, dismissed, undermined? You rehearse in silence until the scenarios lose their sting. Neuroscience calls this exposure in imagination. By confronting pain preemptively, you strip it of surprise. When the storm comes, you do not flinch, because you have already walked through it in your mind 1,000 times. Layer by layer, you then install ritualized command into your daily life, not for health, not for productivity, but for psychological sovereignty. Waking at the same time is no longer about discipline. It's about ownership of time itself. Speaking slower is not about calmness. It's about dominance, the subtle control of social tempo. Practicing silence in conversations is not for mystery, it's for power. These habits are not routines. They are symbols, micro signals to your subconscious that you are in command. And once you believe it, others can't help but believe it too. Even your physical presence must evolve. Every room you enter becomes a stage for positional power. No rush steps, no nervous energy. Every movement, a quiet declaration. I am the threat you didn't prepare for. This is not arrogance. This is calibrated projection. Machiavelli said, one must be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. You become both, clever in observation, terrifying in execution. And as your reconstruction hardens, you adopt the most lethal form of revenge. Revenge through evolution. You don't argue. You don't prove. You don't seek validation. You disappear, then reappear untouchable. This is not about showing them you survived. It's about making them irrelevant. The sting is not that you shouted back. The sting is that they no longer matter in the altitude you've reached. Cognitive psychology confirms this. The brain experiences exclusion as pain, often sharper than insult. By elevating beyond their reach, you inflict the deepest cut without raising a hand. But one rule governs this phase, and it is carved into the strategist's mind. Do not interrupt your enemy while they are underestimating you. Most people, when rebuilding, crave recognition mid-process. They leak progress on social media, fishing for validation. They want applause before they've won. But Machiavellian rebuilding thrives in invisibility. Not because you're ashamed, but because power sharpens best when no one sees the blade coming. This sets the stage for the third phase, the return. Not the silence, not the internal war, the re-entry. How the strategist emerges back into the world, not as they were, but as something unnervingly different. And the secret of the return is this: it does not begin with a bang, it begins with presence. The strategist's return is not an announcement, it is not a declaration, it is presence, quiet, unnerving, undeniable. When you walk back into the room, people feel it before they understand it. The energy shifts. You smile less, explain nothing, and radiate a calm that is not peace, but calculation. That calm is more destabilizing than arrogance ever could be. Because the moment you say, "I've changed," you invite challenge. But when you embody change without speaking it, you force others to adapt or be left behind. This is deliberate. Psychology calls it impression management, but Machiavelli phrased it differently. Rulers must appear virtuous only when it suits them. You don't isolate. That raises suspicion. Instead, you create the illusion of openness. You reveal strategically small wins, not full strategies. You share results, never routines. You let them admire, but never disarm you. This balance of mystery and control forces people into a constant state of speculation. And speculation, in social psychology, always magnifies power. Your relationships must be reordered with surgical precision. During the fall, you observed who stood firm, who vanished, who mocked, who pretended. The strategist forgets nothing. But unlike amateurs, you don't seek revenge through insults or confrontation. You reposition. The loyal, you move closer, but never too close. Over-reliance is a weakness. The disloyal, you erase quietly, emotionlessly, without explanation. The powerful, you do not flatter. You intrigue. You draw them, not by chasing, but by becoming a gravitational force of motion. Your silence makes people talk. Your stillness makes them second guess. Your focus becomes contagious. This is how rulers walk, not to impress, but to be observed. But positional power alone is fragile unless you predict what's next. The strategist rebuilds not into who they want to be, but into who the future battlefield will require. This requires constant scanning of the landscape. What social skills are rising in value? What weaknesses are being exploited with new intensity? Where is cultural attention shifting, and how can it be redirected? Most people chase the present wave. The strategist builds the next boat, and they do it in silence. Every strategist also carries what I call a quiet obsession. This is not a hobby, not a passion project. It is a secret weapon, a skill or knowledge base refined for years, sometimes decades, in the shadows. It might be mastery of human psychology, a rare technical expertise, or an ability to bend social dynamics with subtle cues. You do not broadcast it, you refine it in silence. Because when crisis comes, it is this hidden obsession that gives you the unfair advantage. You don't show up prepared, you show up inevitable. Unfair advantages are the strategist's favorite currency. But evolution demands armor, because the moment your presence begins to rise again, resistance will return. Some will test you, some will mock, some will try to pull you back to your old level. This is inevitable. The world does not care that you rebuilt. That's why the strategist constructs an emotional defense system, not reactive, not defensive, but calibrated. If insulted, you smile slightly, say nothing, and escalate elsewhere. If questioned, you pretend to misunderstand, then redirect with sharper precision. If provoked emotionally, you mirror their words until their own reflection unsettles them. This is not about dignity. It is about programming, perception. People won't remember your argument. They will remember how powerless they felt in your presence. This transforms conflict itself. You no longer avoid it. You transmute it. Every confrontation becomes a stage for dominance, not through aggression, but through control. Social psychology calls this frame control, the ability to dictate the terms of interaction. And those who dictate the frame dictate reality. The ruthless strategist becomes untouchable, not by eliminating conflict, but by weaponizing it. Here's the deeper truth. Rebuilding is not a phase. It is a way of life. Ordinary people think transformation is an event, something you do once after a crisis. The strategist understands it as perpetual. They remain in a constant state of refinement. Every room is a test. Every interaction, a recalibration. Every setback, a signal. This fluidity is their strength. Because the ego's greatest trap is the declaration, "This is the new me." The strategist never freezes an identity. They evolve again before the next blow lands. That means anticipating betrayal, not as paranoia, but as principle. Betrayal, like winter, always returns. Only fools are surprised when it does. The strategist expects it, designs for it, prepares before it strikes, and when it comes, they do not collapse. They adapt, because adaptation is the highest form of dominance. But this ongoing refinement is not random. It is governed by laws. And there are 5 principles the strategist carves into their mind: non-negotiable, unbreakable, or else the old self creeps back in. First, you never explain your pain publicly again. Your suffering is not performance, it is intelligence. Every wound is data, not currency. The strategist does not seek sympathy. They harvest insights. They convert scars into strategy. To reveal your wounds is to hand enemies the blueprint of where to strike. Second, your circle shrinks but sharpens. You become unavailable to those who drain, impatient with those who disguise jealousy as concern. Only 3 remain: the sharp, who challenge your thinking; the silent, who respect your evolution without commentary; and the dangerous, who move with clarity and ruthlessness like you. Everyone else is background noise. If they're not expanding you, they're caging you. Third, every emotion is observed before it is expressed. The old self felt first, reacted next, rationalized after. That cycle made you breakable. Now the sequence reverses. Observe the emotion. Question its utility. Decide whether to release it. Anger? Ask, will this move me forward here? Sadness? Will this signal weakness or loyalty? Joy? Will sharing this expose future vulnerability? This is not fakery. This is sovereignty. You are no longer owned by your emotional currents. You steer them. Fourth, your speech is no longer for connection. It is for shifting dynamics. Every word is functional. You do not vent. You do not overshare. You do not comfort unless it builds rapport. You do not flatter unless it installs leverage. Speech becomes a scalpel, cutting, reshaping, repositioning. And when silence does the work better, you embrace silence not passively, but with intent. Fifth, you never rebuild the same self twice. This is the most dangerous trap of transformation. Freezing, declaring, "This is the new me." That is the moment you become predictable again. The strategist evolves continuously, upgrading before necessity forces it. They shift tone, skill, image, just fast enough to stay untouchable, just slow enough to remain familiar. They remain one step ahead, impossible to corner. This cycle never ends. The strategist accepts it, because permanence is a myth, identity is a tool, and power belongs to those willing to sharpen, discard, and reinvent as the battlefield demands. So now we return to you, the old version, the one who begged to be understood, who sought apologies, who forgave without recalculating cost, who explained pain to people who weaponized it, who clung to fixing things that needed to be ended. That version is gone. In its place stands someone sharper, quieter, heavier. Someone who no longer bends to the noise of the world, but tilts the room subtly just by entering it. Not because they shout, not because they seek, but because they rebuilt with strategy, with silence, with psychological clarity. This is the Machiavellian way, a way not concerned with being liked, but with being effective. A way not enslaved to authenticity as a virtue, but willing to use masks, silence, or solitude when they serve function. The strategist knows people fear what they don't understand and respect what they cannot control. Real power rarely announces itself. It's recognized in the pause, the hesitation, the silence that makes others doubt themselves. Let's be precise. These 5 principles now govern your existence. If you violate them, you slip back into fragility. If you uphold them, you remain untouchable. First, your pain is no longer public currency. The strategist never parades their wounds for sympathy. They harvest them privately, convert them into strategy, and weaponize the lessons. Social psychology shows that vulnerability, when uncontrolled, invites exploitation. The moment you reveal where you bleed, people begin calculating where to stab next. This doesn't mean emotional numbness. It means emotional intelligence, filtered and precise. Your pain is not performance. It is power, but only in your hands. Second, your circle contracts into lethality. Loyalty is no longer measured by proximity, but by clarity of value. Only 3 types remain: the sharp, who challenge your thinking; the silent, who respect your evolution without commentary; and the dangerous, who, like you, move with calculated ruthlessness. Everyone else? Noise. The strategist recognizes that relationships are not all nourishment. Some are cages disguised as comfort, leashes disguised as love, and the ruthless cut those leashes clean. Third, you invert the emotional sequence. The ordinary self feels first, reacts next, rationalizes later. That cycle is what made you manipulable. Now, the strategist observes first, questions second, chooses expression last. This is sovereignty over the most volatile kingdom of all, the mind. Neuroscience confirms it. The gap between stimulus and response is the birthplace of freedom. You live inside that gap now. Emotion becomes not a leash, but a lever. Fourth, you speak not for connection, but for control of dynamics. Every word is functional. Your speech is a scalpel. You do not spill it carelessly, because once spoken, words belong to others. You use them with intent, to reposition, to reframe, to implant. And when silence does better, you choose silence with intent. The weak fill rooms with noise. The strategist bends rooms with quiet. Fifth, you never rebuild the same self twice. This is the law that secures all others, because identity is a trap. Once you declare, "This is the new me," the ego freezes. Predictability returns. And predictability is exploitable. The strategist evolves again before the next blow lands. They anticipate betrayal like seasons. They adapt before necessity demands it. They shift image, skill, tone, and presence with relentless subtlety, always moving just enough to stay untouchable, never enough to appear unstable. They live in perpetual refinement. They are never caught unprepared again. This is not paranoia. It is design, because betrayal, like winter, always comes back. The strategist does not curse winter. They prepare for it, sharpen for it, and use it to expose the unprepared. And so, the final truth emerges. You are no longer the person who seeks to be understood, to be soothed, to be forgiven. That person is dead. In their place is someone reconstructed, not for survival, but for dominance. Someone who doesn't just move through the world, but tilts it quietly, forces others to recalibrate their posture in your presence. Someone who understands what Machiavelli implied in every page. Power is not given. It is designed. It is sculpted in silence. It is respected in shadows. And if you've done this right, no one will even recognize that it's you, not until it's too late.